Using a wider variety of authentic recordings of non-native speaker users of the English language can be time-consuming and challenging. And as an English teacher, you're probably very busy already. That's why I want to give you 3 very quick tips how to quickly choose the right recording for your students so you can save time and be more effective. First tip would be to consider who your students are going to be using English with. For example, are your students doing business with German car makers? Or are they enrolled on a master's program in English in a university in Belgium, for example? So they will be perhaps listening to lectures by professors from a variety of different countries. Are they planning to go on holidays to a particular destination? What kind of speakers are they most likely to interact with when they step outside of your classroom door? This is really, really important because you want to make the listening materials relevant to your students' needs. So the first thing to consider is what kind of speakers or accents your students are likely to hear. Tip number 2 is to consider what accents your students find difficult. For example, I often hear from my students here in Flanders, in Belgium, that they find Asian speakers difficult to understand. Particularly the Chinese English users can be difficult. Also sometimes the Japanese or the Thai students that are also here in the university can prove challenging to understand for some of my students. Therefore, the logical choice as well for me as a teacher would be to try to include those recordings and include some work on bottom-up listening skills that can help my students better understand these speakers when they go outside of my classroom. So tip number 2 is to consider what kind of accents your students find difficult to understand. Tip number 3 is to consider what kind of context your students will be interacting with or what kind of genres they will be listening to. In other words, a lot of my students will have to understand lectures in English. They'll also have to take part in one-to-one meetings or tutorials with their professors and lecturers. They might have to take part in group discussions as well, or small group work seminars. And finally, obviously, they need to also be able to socialize with speakers of different first languages and students of different first languages in the university. So for me, these would be the 4 main genres that my students will be using English in. But for you, it might be different. Maybe you've got business English students who will have to give presentations. Therefore, the logical choice as well of some listening material for you would be, after considering point number 1 and point number 2, so accents your students are likely to hear, accents your students find difficult, would be to choose a presentation, a good example of a good presentation. So to sum up, the 3 tips that I would give you to choose the right recording for your students if you want to include a wider variety of Englishes would be to first, what accents your students are likely to hear outside of the class, what accents they find difficult to understand, and then what is the context in which your students are going to be using English in. If you've enjoyed these tips, if you would like to tackle native speakerism by teaching English as a lingua franca, then check out my online courses on TEFL